This week's episode of the Cloudcast is brought to you by Intel Cloud for All, driving the creation of thousands of clouds.
Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to the Cloudcast, coming to you live from the massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Tonight's going to be a fun show. Aaron, how are you tonight, man?
I'm doing good,
We're back in Raleigh. We're actually both in Raleigh tonight, which is good. Been traveling a whole boatload lately.
Yep.
I was out at DevOps Enterprise Summit this week, which was fun. We actually might maybe end up doing a show based on that one. But anyways, but tonight's going to be fun because we've known the guest. We've known Jonathan Donaldson from Intel, but we've known Jonathan for a very long time, both of us. We both worked with him. I think we may have worked for him. So, Jonathan, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you. Yeah, it's like a class reunion.
I know. So, you're now VP GM of the Software Defined Infrastructure Group at Intel. That's a big deal, man. You're a big deal now.
Yeah, we get to say we knew you when.
That's right.
And here, that's what I said about you guys. I don't have my own podcast to reference. So it's definitely a great position. It shows Intel's level of investment in what they think is the wave of the future for the data center. So they have kind of me leading this group, and then I get to go out and cherry pick top talent to help really kind of push the level of innovation forward. So it's a good gig. I really, really like it here. It's amazing the things that happen at Intel that I just never knew were even here.
And so folks like Nick Weaver work in your group. So obviously a lot of folks know Nick. You work under, I think you report somewhere under Diane Bryant, who is always she's always the person from Intel who gets up on stage at the Facebook conference and the AWS conference and goes, here's the awesome stuff we're building in data centers and new servers and stuff. So I was thinking on this and just to put a little bit in perspective, because like the last couple of weeks have been interesting. We were kind of BSing before the show. You had the Dell and EMC merger, which people are going to talk about for a long time. AWS reInvent was last week. Microsoft announced big earnings today. Google announced big earnings. AWS and Amazon. Like we're at an interesting crossroads. And I was thinking about Jonathan, you and I think it was about 2007. Without going way back in the time machine, we were working on a project for Cisco, and it was sort of a little spin-out thing before Cisco made a big deal about spin-outs. And if you remember right, there was two interesting things we did. One was we used to get these Asian ODMs come in, and they would go, hey, here's commodity hardware for network stuff, and it runs the same speed and performance, and it's 1/10 the price. And we sat there and we went, oh my God, how in the world does this happen? And then we were kind of building out this service provider thing, and one day we didn't have any servers, and we went on the web and we were like, hey, look, you can buy servers and storage online from Amazon. And I remember those two things. Now, that was 7 years ago, and we were kind of blown away by it, and we were kind of excited by it, and then it kind of grew from there. But it's been for people that are kind of going like, what's going on in the world? Is the world going public cloud, or is it staying private cloud, or is it mixed? Like, we're not in the first inning. Like, this has been going on for 6 or 7 years if you were really paying attention.
The old service node, right? And the joke on the this is not the first inning, right? It's kind of the same thing. If you remember back from our days in marketing at Cisco, right? There's always a 5-step plan, and you're always at step 3, no matter where you are in the time continuum, right?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what we're seeing here now. But a lot of it isn't. You don't really see it until kind of after the fact, right? Because it's hard to pull all the pieces together and see it.
So you've been working on this thing. You work on a ton of things. I mean, your group does. You've got guys working on really bleeding edge open source stuff like Kubernetes and Mesos and containers and stuff. And then at your level, you're working on this sort of how do we get more clouds out there? Looking at sort of it's an initiative called Cloud for All. But I mean, really, you're out there going like there's so much possibility. Business-wise, agility-wise, when people start adopting these cloud models, like what are you guys doing to drive that? Because Intel has an interesting position, right? You're kind of a vendor, but you've got a lot of ways to influence markets too. Like, what are the things you guys are doing to drive this kind of new knowledge places and make investments places and so forth?
Right. So we kind of call that it's the Cloud for All initiative, and as Diane had stated, and Diane does a great job of kind of articulating the vision, and just to give her a quick kudo. I mean, as the leader of our group, right? She's an electrical engineer as well as a leader, so she understands the technology, which is a really good person to work for. But when you kind of look at what is Intel trying to do in the space, we have this belief, right, that if we go and create the same types of cloud technologies as you see in the big, public cloud service providers, and get those equally available to enterprise customers, to the smaller CSPs, and allow all of them to kind of have that agility, that you'll see this wave of innovation, much like we saw happen in the public cloud, right? So if it's that barrier to entry type of concept, that if you lower the unit cost of delivering, a VM or a container or a piece of your application, and at the same time make it really, really easy for me as a developer to go spin that up, I'm more likely to try new things, right? And out of that comes this massive wave of innovation that we've seen in the public cloud, mostly around the kind of the direct-to-consumer types of applications, the Ubers and the Twitters and the Airbnbs and Facebook and those types of things. We think the same thing will happen in the enterprise. So when we look at that, we say, okay, so what are the gaps that we see today in the private cloud space and in the smaller service provider space that we can help kind of identify what those feature gaps are or solution gaps are, and then help go fill those, right? So you mentioned Nick Weaver. You mentioned things like Kubernetes and Mesos. We've got guys on the team and women on the team that their life right now at Intel is dedicated to making those things very, very easy to consume in private and public clouds, very, very easy to leverage and to start that innovation cycle. Nick is driving a whole startup group inside of my team called SDIX, right? The X stands for whatever it takes to make those things valuable to customers. We've got other people on the team, gentleman named Das Kamhout. He kind of grew up here at Intel and used to run the 120,000 server design cloud that we have here. So we've got a lot of people on my team that have, massive domain expertise in these areas. And what they're doing is they're looking back going, wow, these were the things that were really hard for me to go do when I stood this up myself. And how do we make this easy for everyone else to go do? And so that's really, at the core of it, that's the initiative behind the Cloud for All program is, how do we take our partners out there, partners like, VMware and Microsoft, and partners like, HP with Helion, and Red Hat with Red Hat OSP, right, and Mirantis with Fuel, all of the OpenStack vendors, and how do we get all of them to be able to make private cloud and a hybrid cloud easy?
Yeah, it makes sense. Well, and what's really been interesting here lately is I think Brian and I have been talking about it on the show for a while now. And actually, we had a guest a while back, Simon Wardley, who it was actually kind of funny, again, going kind of time machine for a second. Jonathan, when we were at VCE together, you sent me, or sent actually to the entire team, this video of like, the cloud and the vision and everything. It was actually Simon's keynote. I want to say from OSCON or one of those, right? And that was, 5 years ago, probably? Yep. 4 years ago, somewhere in that point.
Yep.
Yep. But and one of the big things that stood out, both when we talked to Simon and in that video, was really this public cloud and this eventual consolidation of the industry, just mainly because of the economies of scale and the R&D it takes to run a public cloud. And you look at, Dell and EMC did their thing, but then VMware spun off a lot of the vCloud Air stuff to Virtustream this week. HP kind of got out of public clouds again this week. Rackspace is kind of doing their thing and partnering with AWS. It's like there's so many just weird things, but it all leads to in that trend of what Simon really predicted all along. But what is your kind of perspective on all of that? Of you're kind of above all of it. You're seeing a lot of the OpenStack stuff and all of the public cloud stuff all at the same time.
Yeah, I think, the perspective that I see from kind of Intel's landscape is there's a lot of players out there that are trying to find their position in this, ever changing game of Tetris, right? So, where can they make the most value and where can they derive the most revenue and the most value for their company, their shareholders, their products, et cetera. There's obviously a lot of consolidation happening out there, and I think some of the consolidation happens because either there are technologies that are changing and shifting, so some things that were proprietary before are now moving to open source, right? EMC and VMware have done just amazing things that I wouldn't have thought that I would have ever seen from them years ago, as far as taking some of their proprietary products and software and moving them into open source, right? VMware with Photon and EMC with Viper, which is what Copperhead now, I think, is the external term.
Right.
And so I think, even that in and of itself is kind of almost along those same lines, is that, people are rapidly looking around going, okay, where's my value in this changing ecosystem? And some of that value will be, derived or transmitted through these consolidations. Some of them, the consolidations are done because, maybe there wasn't value where they thought there was. But I don't think that our ecosystem is going to get any less simpler through these consolidations. I think what you're going to see is some of the more mature technologies start to consolidate, but then there's this always increasing wave of innovation that's happening out there in these little startups, and then even some of the larger companies that is always going to be driving new market segments, driving new technologies, right? Companies like Mesosphere and Kubernetes going out there with the CoreOS guys, with Tectonic, right? There's this massive wave of the kind of these upstarts, if you will, that are going to keep driving this forward. And I think, to me, that's the most exciting thing, is that we're not, even with the consolidation, we're not seeing a slowdown of the innovation cycle. We're actually, in my case, is seeing it accelerate, because the consolidation bits actually kind of, make the way for some of these new technologies.
Yeah. So, some of us have been, when we work together on various things, some of us have been dealing with some of the private cloud stuff for a while. Went through the whole converged infrastructure early phases, yep. and it was kind of building private cloud. A lot of it was just can you add some automation to virtualization, and to a certain extent, I think if you asked a lot of people, if you said hey, are there tons of private clouds? I think for a while people would go, yeah, we're building a private cloud, and then if you asked them a year later, you'd kind of go, well, what do you do? And it would be like, well, it's it's a lot of virtualization, right? It doesn't have the self-service thing, and the automation isn't. Do you think that's is part of that just some of us want things to go really fast and we get frustrated too early, or do you think part of that is it was kind of you shouldn't have been so much thinking about how to build a private cloud or an Amazon-like cloud if you were just talking about legacy applications. We a lot of companies haven't hit that point where they should sort of be building these newer modern applications or something. I mean, is it just a skills and a patience thing that we need to wait up for, or is it more companies kind of have to feel some pain in terms of having the right technology to compete in new ways?
Right. Yeah, that's a tough question to ask with the three of us, right? We're all not known as being very patient people, especially when it comes to technology. So I would say it's probably a blend of those things. I think, having been in the vendor technology space like the three of us have, especially over the years, right, and always leaning towards the newer technologies, right, the more leading edge of things. None of us are very good at the care and feeding of existing technology. I would say that, from our perspective, yes, I think there's a bit of technology, let's hurry up, right, kind of aspect to what we, the frustrations that we see. But I would say that, if we went out and we canvied a lot of enterprise customers and we canvassed a lot of the tier twos, they look upon the big cloud providers with envy to some extent, right? None of us like our pagers to go off, I guess that's aging myself there when I say pagers, right? None of us like, that 2 a.m. wake up on a Sunday, right, in IT because some critical system is down. If we could have the capability for that to have automatically through automation, right, or even through better, more resilient microservices style application design, for that to have never happened or for it to kind of, taking care of itself, I think we would all vote for that from our days in IT. But it's really, really hard, right? I mean, it's the skill sets have to morph over time. And, Brian, if you remember from our days at Cisco, right, when Cisco first acquired Celsius and we were out there trying to get people to migrate over to voice over IP, right? I mean, we've all had the conversation, right? When we were SEs, we would go in and we'd sit down at a table, and on one side of the table you'd have the PBX guys, and on the other side of the table you'd have the networking staff, right? And then you have the CIO at the head of the table and the CFO at the foot of the table, and they're arguing back and forth because the PBX guys didn't like the networking guys and vice versa. They were threatened by each other, and the CFO would say something like, we really need to go look at this. Cisco's here to talk to us about voice over IP, and from all the dollars and cents, it makes perfect sense for us to go drive that. And the PBX guys would say, there's no way you're going to take my mission critical voice and run it across that Ethernet stuff. And the networking guys were like, nope, we'll do it. It's just another application to us. And, there'd just be this deadlock right there at the table. And then, when we'd leave the room, right, always there'd be one of the PBX people hanging around, right, looking for their pencil they dropped under the table, or, some other kind of excuse to be there until all of their peers left. And then they would, kind of look up and down the hallway and go, so if somebody wanted to understand this voice over IP stuff, where would they get started? And so I think, if you look inside almost every IT shop, there's always those people that want to do the next thing, right? They want to innovate. They want to drive it forward. But, transitioning your value, right? It's the people and process problem that we had even with voice over IP. If my paycheck is predicated on the fact that, I have certain certifications for, a certain vendor, and I know where to kick the box when it misbehaves, and I know who to call on those. If I can ease that adoption, by making it easier and by doing lots and lots of education, we'll see the trend happen a lot quicker. And so I think it's a combination of things, right? So, to get back to your question, yes, we as technology, forward leaners, if you will, are always going to be frustrated by the pace. And that's what draws us to the new technologies, right? We like that innovation. I think if you then go canvas most customers, their life is so hectic and so harried that they just need the easy version of that that's good enough to get moving forward. And then kind of once you start to ease that burden of their daily, life through the automation and things like that, then they're going to be equally as hungry to go drive that innovation, whether it be for, financial strategic benefit for the company or for even their own, wishes for being an innovator.
Yeah. So Intel plays an interesting role, right? You talked about a bunch of companies, some of which you guys get a chance to invest in or with, through Intel Capital and so forth. Some of the guys you do some cool partnerships with, so like the Tectonic launch with CoreOS, you guys played a role in it, partially, from a packaging perspective, but partially because you were contributing code, you were contributing. Mm-hmm. It's a hard question to ask because it's like asking a parent which of their kids they like the best. But just from a technologist perspective, right, your curiosity perspective, like, are there certain projects that you're kind of looking at going, I'm going to keep my eye on that one, maybe a little more, because there's something in there that I really think is going to pop, or somebody doing something really cool. Like what's kind of on your radar, and just from your geek perspective that it's really cool these days.
Yeah, well, there's so many of them. That's the problem. I wish I had more time. Apache Mesos is very cool, right? We just did some stuff called Project Serenity with the guys at Mesosphere, and then the wider Mesos community. expose some silicon features, right, that allow you to bin pack tighter. The Kubernetes stuff, working with Google and Craig McCluskey and the team over there to make Kubernetes better. Seriously interesting stuff. We just attached like the VT technologies to Rocket with the CoreOS team and Docker with the Docker team, so that you can get kind of that same VM style of security and isolation on containers. Like those are all super cool things. Like for me, from a geek perspective, like some of the things like at Project Calico, where they're assigning a /32 IP address and then using BGP route reflection everywhere for a container network. And I think that is just like, I'm scratching my head looking at it going, wow, what a cool idea. But, if you remember back to the CCIE days, Brian and Aaron, I mean, oh my gosh, trying to do BGP route reflection everywhere. It's just going to be like, I want to see how they do that. And so, a lot of these things I just, that cross my desk or we get involved in, there's so much just cool stuff going on. Photon itself, right? Some of the things that the VMware side's coming out with in that from a scheduler perspective, I just look at that and go, wow, this is really cool stuff. And just to be flat out honest with you, Nick Weaver has to spend an hour at a whiteboard with me sometimes, sketching out some of the stuff so I can get a handle on some of the more esoteric math. But it's all just crazy cool stuff. And one of the interesting things is, when I came into Intel and I looked at all the silicon stuff that they do here, it's the stuff that's coming out over, next generations is just absolutely amazing, right? They launched the 3D XPoint memory technology stuff, which is just super cool, and the applications even into some of these spaces is just beyond mind-blowing to me. So, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, if we got like one really cool project, right, that crossed our desk per year, that was great. 3 years ago when we got a cool project that crossed our desk, once a quarter, that was awesome. Now it's almost like there's something super interesting crossing my desk or my email almost every single day. And so there's just so many of them to keep up with that it's just, the pace of innovation is nutty, and I love it, and I don't want it to slow down because every single day there's something new and something cool that I'm looking at.
You raised something really interesting there, though, too, because that's the kind of geeky side of Jonathan, but as kind of the VP GM side, how do you figure out, like, how do you approach it from a strategy, and what are the dynamics? Kind of, you have to combine the economics and the technology, right? You have to balance them out. There are only so many bets you can place. How does that factor into it? Like, because a lot of the, if you have to put the exec hat on for a little while, how do you approach something like that?
Right, absolutely. So, when I have to take off my, wow, this is awesome and this is cool hat, and I have to kind of go put on my where do I spend the money hat, it typically comes down to kind of one of three things, right? So, and maybe it'll be one of four things by the time I'm done talking, but it comes down to, like, if I go look at what our customers are asking us for, and by customers at Intel, right, there's a broad swath of people. There's the enterprise customers, there's the small and medium-sized service providers, and then the large cloud providers. They're each asking for slightly different things, and so, what significantly moves the needle for each of them, right? So if it's the enterprise side, how do they get, lower TCO? How do they get, higher performance? How do they get the easy button for deploying new technologies, and how can they be, strategic and competitive in their marketplace? And if it's the tier twos, it's the smaller and medium service provider type of thing, right? It's the, how can they compete in that dynamic marketplace, right? How can they differentiate themselves from their competition, and how can they be as agile as the larger public cloud providers on service creation and delivery? And then, if you're the large public cloud service providers, it's how can you keep that momentum moving? How can you keep attracting workloads? How can you keep your cost of service delivery low enough that you can, continue to drive the waves of innovation that they do? And so, typically when I look at these things, we'll kind of do some lots of analysis, lots of value judgment, looking at, what customers are asking us for, where the gaps are. Does this technology or project fill that gap, and can it be broadly adopted, right? So from an Intel perspective, for something to be valuable, it's got to be valuable to a large segment of our customer base. Otherwise, it's kind of small noise type of things. And so we kind of use that value lens against it, which is, does this significantly move the needle on, ease of adoption of major technologies? Does it shift industry perception? Does it, allow customers to do more than they were doing yesterday? Those types of things are really kind of what we have to go look at. And, that's kind of the lens that we use when we, go spend money on things or dedicate resources.
And you guys are hiring folks that get to work on all this cool stuff, sort of vendor neutral or independently?
Yeah, so that's, at Intel, right, so we have a lot of different partners, right? And so when you kind of look across the landscape of all of our customers and partners, right, we want all of them to be successful. And so, yes, we're very, very vendor neutral or vendor agnostic, as long as, everybody is doing the right thing for the community and for our end customers. And so, yes, we are hiring a tremendous amount of people on my team, developers, we're hiring architects, right, people that have networking experience, people that are doing a lot of stuff in the software-defined networking space or compute or storage, automation, scheduling, right, lots and lots of people. We just hired Nicholas Nielsen and Connor Doyle that are Nicholas is a core committer for Mesos, right? We love that skill set from an automation perspective. And so, if people want to go, really, really change how the industry consumes technology in the data center, and you have a passion for that new technology and you have a passion for solving problems for customers, we are a very, very good place to go do that. And so they should definitely get in contact with me.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Hey, this is probably one of those ones that you may tell me that you'll get in trouble for, but
awesome.
So
what else is new?
So I think I heard somewhere recently. I think I saw it was and this was printed, so I don't think I'm making anything up. I think Diane Bryant had said that like 30% of the servers these days are being sold to the big cloud providers, and she didn't specify like what big cloud provider meant, but. And I think what she said was, a lot of them will get sort of custom things, whether that's like custom silicon or custom built boxes or whatever. And like how much of that, and those guys obviously have very unique requirements around power and cooling. And I mean, because they're turning it into a business, every kilowatt, every bit, they can calculate as a cent or what is a click. How much of that stuff over time gets into the mainstream products that will, be allowed for the enterprises to go buy as a regular, Xeon, whatever, and how much of it roughly stays pretty much, kind of custom stuff for your biggest customers, essentially?
So I would say that predominantly the things that are valuable to everybody that we kind of, co-develop or, work with the large cloud providers to develop something that they consume kind of on a custom SKU basis or a custom platform basis, right? Like NASA, right? Most of the stuff from the space program that made sense to make it out into the mainstream does, right? And so the same thing with us, right? So you see things like the FPGAs that are sitting right next to the silicon, right? Those are making it into the mainstream, right? Those kind of started out with the large cloud service providers asking for, how do I go get accelerators like you have built in the silicon? How do I test those out? How do I get, those programmatically done? And so, even if we don't know from their perspective, right, which ones are valuable to them and not. And so, things like the FPGAs, right, is a first step on that. Custom accelerators, custom platforms, those have all been things that have been kind of, mainstream for the big cloud service providers, because they're all looking, they know what their fleet looks like in their data centers, and they know the optimizations for the most part that they would like to make this run smoother and lower cost and higher performance. And so a lot of that, bleeds out into the rest of the enterprise or the rest of the data center landscape as it's ready to consume for them. So I would say, most of it happens that way. They just happen to be, more sophisticated in a lot of ways, and so they can take advantage of those early access programs sooner than anybody else can.
Yep.
When you have a legion of PhDs on tap at your large cloud service provider to go figure out the really tough math on things, right? Then you can do some pretty interesting and innovative things before anybody else can. Right. And then as that becomes more mainstream, right, then you look into the next wave of things.
Right. Yeah, and really what we're seeing here is really this idea of the super cutting edge stuff is just honestly where the market that is initially consuming it is just shifting slightly in the industry, whether it's through public cloud, whether it's through IoT, all of these kind of as the landscape of the industry shifts, so does the consumption models.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. So let me ask you this real quick, Jonathan. So I did mention IoT. Like I was at the AWS conference, and they kind of mentioned their new IoT platform, and we're starting to see it a lot from some of the others as well. And Cisco, of course, kind of leading the charge, probably a little bit back. So that leads very much into a cloud play, and this idea of really connecting everything is actually starting to happen. Where does kind of Intel and SDI specifically, where do you see the state of IoT these days, and kind of a little bit of crystal ball, where do you see the near future of IoT?
Yeah, so we have a whole IoT division here at Intel, and I just provide the plumbing for them essentially, right? If you want to think about it that way. We have a peer of mine in the big data side. They released a trusted analytics platform. Like you mentioned, AWS has their flavors and others. And I think that this is one of those really, really interesting places that we're gonna, as a community and as an ecosystem, learn quite a bit over the next few years about what's valuable in an IoT world and what's not. Analytics from vehicles, and analytics from your Fitbits and your watches, your Apple Watches and your phones, as well as industrial IoT. I think we're going to learn quite a bit about how people use technology and what's valuable and how we can have it work for us. When I look at that space, I don't even have an inkling of where it's going to go, right? It's like for me, it's like looking at something that is just amazing, but yet in the early stages of things. And so the best thing that my group can do to support that is to make sure that those back-end data center systems are ready for whatever they throw at us, because I've got this feeling that as IoT and as things start to get more and more instrumented, and we start to learn more and more insights from that the demand on the data center side from the analytics perspective is going to just skyrocket.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, we're kind of out of time for this week. Jonathan, where can everyone find out more about you and Intel and everything you have going on?
Wow. So obviously, we've got the Intel.com site. We have check out our all the requisitions. The head count that we have open there. We have J Donalds, which is my Twitter handle. Nick Weaver's LinksBat. We have all of the normal places. Let's throw it out as a challenge kind of thing. If you are interested in a really cool and interesting job. And you can find us, then please absolutely contact us through the normal channels, and we will be happy to talk to everybody, whether it's about a job or it's just about technology and what we're doing in that space. We would love to talk to people. We like the feedback.
Okay. Very cool. Very cool. Listen, dude, it was great it was good to talk to you. We run into you sometimes at shows.
Absolutely.
Sometimes we don't get a chance to talk about work stuff because we're kind of catching up, but very cool the stuff you guys are working on, making a very big difference in things. And it's I'll tell you this, I know Aaron and I have run into people at different conferences. Like you've got your fingers in a lot of things, and there are a lot of people at a lot of startup companies that love working with you guys. So you're doing good stuff. Say hi to Nick for us and the rest of the guys on the team, and thank you for being on tonight.
We'll do, absolutely. And we need to work out one of these conferences where we can all go out and grab a dinner and a beer because it's been way, way too long.
Yep, absolutely. Well, cool. Folks, thanks for listening, and we will see you again next week.
Thank you for listening to the Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.